Heather the Necromancer. Chapter 1. Chosen. She sat up slowly, raising her hand to her head as she blinked to clear her vision. Her body felt heavy, as if moving through water as she looked around and saw the trees. "Where am I?" she whispered, while struggling to get to her feet. Her legs felt unstable and almost unresponsive, as if they moved a second slower than she tried to move them. With a stagger, she stood up and dusted off her jeans. She had no idea where she was. It looked like a small clearing in a forest under a sunny noon sky. "All right, I'm in a strange forest instead of my bedroom," she said in confusion. She spun around again and considered the option that this was a dream. Of course it was a dream. How else would she go to bed in her apartment in the city and wake up in a forest? The only other possibility was... "No!" she called out in panic. Her eyes searched all around until she spotted a small break in the trees. She ran for the gap and found a narrow path that snaked into the dark forest. Her legs worked as fast as they could, desperate to carry her away as if she could run from the truth. The path twisted and turned, but offered her no comfort or escape. "No!" she cried as her legs began to feel tired. "I don't want to be chosen." The forest ended at a meadow of wavy grass and sunny flowers. She slumped to her knees and dipped her head as the reality sank in. "Why do things like this always happen to me?" she asked, staring at the ground. She took a few moments to steady her breathing and get her bearings. She was in New Eden, the world created to help the visitors learn. She was one of the chosen who would help them by living in this world. They would watch her and learn from the choices she made to help them understand humans. "I choose to get out of here," she shouted to no one in particular. She remembered herself and patted down her pockets. Her purse was gone, and with it her phone. In her pocket she found a dime, a quarter, and an old receipt for pizza. "Not going very far with that," she said with a sigh. She wobbled back to her feet and resigned herself to her current situation. Okay, deep breaths. I'm alive, I'm in a fantasy world, and I have nothing but the clothing on my back. I'm in good shape, right? Nothing answered her. Oh, who am I kidding? How am I supposed to survive in a world like this? I never played video games. For all I know, a dragon will swoop down and eat me at any moment. She looked to the sky and wondered if perhaps that could happen. With no other choices, she wandered out into the grassland, watching all around for dangers. She heard stories of monsters prowling this world and how people use swords and magic to battle them. She looked at her hands briefly and wondered how to do magic. She remembered a little from when her brother played role-playing games. It was all just something to tease him about, but she gleaned some information from it. "So, am I class or something?" she asked. "Maybe I am a paladin." She wasn't even sure what a paladin was. All she knew was her brother played one, and he could smite the unholy. She stopped and pointed at a bush before commanding it to kneel before her power. Nothing happened, and she felt foolish for trying. An hour later she was still crossing the impossibly vast field as distant hills began to grow on the horizon. She tried to remember the stories about this place and what it was for. If it was true, she was being watched by them right now. She decided to try to speak to them and looked to the sky before calling out. "What is the point of this place? How am I supposed to do anything? I refuse to keep walking for no good reason." "Fine," she said, and casually sat down on a rock. "I will sit here until you answer me or let me out." Hours went by as she sat on the rock, growing more and more uncomfortable. The sun seemed to be taking an impossibly long time to cross the sky. Now that she looked at it, the sky was overly blue, almost as if she was looking through water at the bottom of a swimming pool. She wondered if that was what it was, water hovering overhead in some vast blue dome. She folded her arms and looked away, refusing to find joy in anything. She was simply not going to enjoy any of this and would sit here and pout until it ended. She nodded herself awake when she nearly fell off her rock. She blinked her eyes and looked up at the sky to see the sun had hardly moved. "Did I sleep a whole day, or are days here 100 hours long?" she muttered as she considered it. She realized her butt hurt, and with reluctance got up to stretch. She took another look around to see nothing had changed while she napped. The landscape was still a field of gently swaying grass and flowers broken up by random trees. With a sigh, she decided to sit on the ground instead and folded her arms as she resumed her angry grimace. She lost track of time as she watched a couple of ants meander across the ground. She wasn't sure how long she'd been there, or at what point she forgot to be angry. She looked around again, and the sun finally seemed to have decided to move. In fact, it seemed to be moving as she watched it. To her amazement, it dipped low in the sky until the sky streaked with reds, oranges and pinks before it suddenly stopped and hung there again. "This isn't how time works," she yelled at the uncaring sky. "You can't just move it to specific moments." She growled in anger as she got up and kicked the rock at her side. "Ow!" she cried as she hobbled around, cursing her luck. "Aren't I supposed to be a superhero or something? Shouldn't rocks break when I kick them?" She stood there, seething in anger and pain, when she heard a noise and looked over her shoulder. Her stomach sank as she saw something she would rather not have. It stood at least twice her height, with a body that resembled a green caterpillar. It had a ring of long, rope-like tentacles around a gaping circular maw. It inched its way across the open field, making a deep, rumbling groan as it went. "Get me out!" she shrieked when she saw it. The creature reacted to the sound and turned its gaping maw her way. She could see the mouth was ringed by black eyes, and all of them locked on her. The hills echoed with the sound of screaming as Heather ran in pain on her injured foot. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" she panted with every breath as she ran. Her sides began to hurt nearly as bad as her foot. She wanted to stop, but she could hear the beast growling behind her. With panic, she ran over a hill and saw a group of stone structures in a yard below. It was ringed by a twisted metal fence, and several dead gnarled trees grew inside. Without hesitating, she ran for the yard, hoping she could find shelter. She glanced over her shoulder to see the monster was falling behind, but still pursuing her. She pushed on as the pain in her foot and sides grew and finally reached the gate of the graveyard. "Oh, wonderful," she groaned as she ran inside. "This is the perfect place to be eaten and die." She could see now that the stone buildings were mausoleums. In her terror, she ran for one with an open door. Without thinking, she threw herself inside the narrow opening, tumbling to the floor. A few moments later, the beast was at the door, growling with a hiss from outside. It was too big for the doorway, but to her shock, several of the long tentacles reached in. "Ooh, no," she cried. "Tentacles never end well for girls in anime." She kicked at them violently as they probed for her and scooted back until the ground gave way beneath her. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" she cried as she tumbled down a flight of stairs. She opened her eyes to a world of painful sensation. Her foot hurt, her head hurt, her everything hurt. She slowly sat up and looked around to see she was in a surprisingly well-lit room. It was made of stone brick walls, many of them cracked, and spiderwebs hung in every corner. The floor was dusty, and so was she as she struggled to remain sitting. The room was empty except for a flight of stairs up and an arched doorway behind her. There wasn't a visible source of light anywhere in the room, and while it all appeared to be dark with shadows, she could see. "Maybe I'm dead," she said aloud. "I don't know about you, but I sure am," a voice answered. She froze and turned her head slowly to look behind her. There, not 5 feet away, stood a hunched, gangly creature with grey skin blotched with green and black. Its hair was ragged and thinning, its eyes a sickly yellow, and its sharp teeth pointed. It had hands with unnaturally long fingers that ended in black hooked nails. "Hi, I'm Frank the Ghoul," he said. Her screams echoed down the tunnels of the crypt.